Every aristocrat in the city was watching. This was not a concert, it was a battle. Only one could be called the greatest. In classical music, there was no room for two kings. But Liszt and Thalberg were only the beginning. Why did composers hate each other? The real answers shaped everything you've ever heard. Every seat was claimed by Paris's elite, nobility, critics, composers, and rivals. Liszt arrived in a storm of confidence, his reputation for wild brilliance preceding him. Thalberg, immaculate and unreadable, took his place at the Erard piano. This was no ordinary concert. Each pianist unveiled new works forged for this night alone. Liszt with his volcanic reminiscences of Robert le Diable, Thalberg countering with a fantasy on Rossini's Moise. The duel unfolded in alternating attacks. Liszt's fingers blazed, daring the instrument to survive. Thalberg unleashed his so-called three-hand illusion, the melody singing above a swirl of arpeggios. The room held its breath. When the final note faded, the verdict swept through the crowd. Princess Belgiojoso declared, "Thalberg is the first pianist in the world. Liszt is unique." The Gazette Musicale called it a draw, but everyone knew reputation was the true prize. In this world, victory was measured in whispers and headlines. But this was only the beginning. Composers' rivalry wasn't just a piano duel. The next conflict would tear the music world in two. Brahms and Wagner did not just write music, they drew battle lines across a continent. In the 1850s, Eduard Hanslick's manifesto thundered through Vienna, defending Brahms's vision of absolute music, pure, structured, free from the chaos of story and spectacle. Wagner, meanwhile, demanded that music become drama, fusing sound and myth until the orchestra itself seemed to breathe. Critics and composers split into rival camps. Hanslick's essays filled concert halls with arguments, not applause. By 1876, Wagner's Bayreuth Festival stood as a fortress for his followers, funded by thousands of loyal subscribers and crowned with the premiere of the Ring Cycle. Brahms supporters fired back in the press, their alliances forged in smoky cafes and editorial rooms. Concert programs became manifestos. The fight moved from music to ideology, from salons to newspapers, from the stage to the institutions that defined what classical music even meant. This was no passing feud, it was a composer's rivalry that divided Germany, split audiences, and turned classical music drama into a war of ideas. But this was not the only rivalry. Some would say the next would haunt music history forever. The story of Mozart and Salieri is less a tale of rivalry than a lesson in how myth can overpower truth. The infamous poisoning rumor did not surface at the Vienna court, but decades later, when Alexander Pushkin's 1830 play transformed professional competition into deadly drama. Rimsky-Korsakov's opera fanned the flames, and soon the world believed Salieri had murdered Mozart out of jealousy. But court payroll records from the 1790s show Salieri's steady employment, no scandal, no investigation, just business as usual. The real evidence tells a different story. Salieri mourned Mozart's death, taught his son, and continued to compose. Yet, the legend of betrayal proved irresistible. In the end, it was scandal, not fact, that shaped their reputations. The Mozart versus Salieri myth became the ultimate classical music drama. A composer's rivalry explained not by reality, but by the stories people wanted to hear. And then, the question of who owns genius would spark new wars in the concert halls. The critics sharpened their knives as Claude Debussy and Maurice Ravel circled each other in the salons and concert halls, a new kind of composer's rivalry, not just over fame, but over the very sound of the future. Debussy's shimmering harmonies, first electrified by the gamelan's metallic haze at the 1889 exposition, had already unsettled the old guard. Ravel, younger and hungry, drew from the same palette, whole-tone scales, floating rhythms, a dreamlike blur. But whispers grew. Who was the real inventor? When Ravel's Judo debuted, one review in Le Figaro sneered, "Debussy's shadow falls long over the fountains." Debussy bristled at the suggestion of imitation, calling Ravel a clever counterfeit. Ravel fired back, dissecting Debussy's scores in print. Audiences and critics picked sides, dissecting every motif for evidence of theft. The question hung in the air, unresolved. Could a musical fingerprint ever be owned? And as the accusations deepened, the fight moved beyond style, threatening to split the Parisian institutions that shaped music history. The stage was set for a classical music drama where reputation and originality meant everything. Tchaikovsky stared into the mirror, searching for answers in the face the world had learned to judge. In 1877, a letter arrived from Nadezhda von Meck, a wealthy patron who had become his lifeline. But outside that private shelter, the critics circled like wolves. After the first performance of his Symphony No. 4, critics called his music overwrought, foreign, even dangerous. Eduard Hanslick's review of the Piano Concerto No. 1 in Vienna labelled it unplayable bombast, a verdict that echoed in concert halls and salons. Russian nationalists dismissed him as a traitor to his roots, while Western critics scoffed at his emotional excess. The attacks didn't just bruise, they broke him. Tchaikovsky's letters from 1877 and 1878 reveal a man tormented, forced to revise his symphonies, doubting every note. Each revision was a plea for acceptance, but the more he changed, the more the critics sharpened their knives. Reputation became a battlefield, and every review was a wound. In the end, it wasn't a single rival, it was the world itself. And then the fight for survival in the classical music rivalry would take on new forms. Spotify's algorithm doesn't care about genius, it cares about numbers. In 2023, Ludovico Einaudi racked up over 6 million monthly listeners. His piano tracks, like Nuvole Bianche, became the soundtrack for millions, echoing through peaceful piano playlists and racking up over 1 billion streams. Max Richter, with his cinematic soundscapes and haunting strings, peaked at about 1.8 million. The difference was not talent, it was code. Einaudi's music, stripped to its essence, fit perfectly into the background. Skip rates dropped, completion soared, and the algorithm rewarded him with more exposure, more streams, more so-called success. Richter's complexity demanded attention, earning critical praise but fewer playlist slots. In 2019, The Guardian quoted Richter's frustration with overexposed classics, hinting at a deeper battle, art as commodity versus art as challenge. Now, the fight for dominance is not fought in salons or concert halls. It is waged in curated playlists where software decides whose legacy lives on. The classical music rivalry has not faded. It has just gone digital. Liszt understood something his rivals couldn't ignore. In the world of classical music rivalry, fame wasn't just glory, it was currency. One calculated move could tip the scales. In the spring of 1837, he staged a publicity stunt that would echo across Paris. Liszt announced a marathon concert series, promising to play 12 concerts in 12 days, each one featuring new, never-before-heard arrangements. The press devoured the story. Journalists flooded the Arad showroom, scribbling every word, every rumour. Parisian society scrambled for tickets, desperate to be seen at the event everyone would talk about. The result was Liszt's name on every tongue and his image in every paper. That season, his commission ledger jumped by 120%, an explosion in income that put him leagues ahead of Thalberg and every other would-be rival. The message was clear, reputation could be engineered, and the right spectacle could turn a composer into a myth. In the salons, whispers turned into alliances, and alliances into invitations. The more Liszt's fame grew, the more powerful and untouchable he became. But each move for the spotlight came at a price. As the stakes rose, so did the pressure from critics, patrons, and enemies circling for their own share of the glory. Ego wasn't just a personal trait, it was a weapon, and in the composer's rivalry, the fight for attention was just as fierce as any duel at the piano. As the competition for fame reached fever pitch, outside forces began to shape the battlefield in ways no composer could control. In the world of classical music rivalry, there was never enough room at the top. Every composer fought for survival inside a system built on scarcity, limited posts, few commissions, and even fewer tickets to immortality. In 1842, a ledger from the Vienna court listed just 6 official appointments for composers, but more than 40 hopefuls clawed at the door. The odds were brutal. One slot could decide a lifetime's reputation, and the rest faded into the background, their music lost to dust. This wasn't just about ego, it was about identity, about who was allowed to shape the sound of a nation. By 1890, concert repertoire surveys revealed a new reality. 68% of major performances featured nationalist works, a sharp turn from the cosmopolitan tastes of just a generation before. Composers didn't just compete for applause, they fought to define what counted as German, French, or Russian music, each note a claim on cultural territory. The institutions that programmed these concerts, from royal courts to subscription societies, wielded enormous power. A single rejection could end a career, and a single endorsement might launch a legend. The pressure didn't just come from rivals at the keyboard, it came from the very structure of the music world itself. Scarcity bred factions, and factions bred conflict. This was the engine behind every famous composer's conflict, every classical music drama, every duel that turned genius against genius. The battle lines were drawn not just in salons, but in the ledgers and repertoires that determined who would be remembered. And as the gates narrowed, the fight for artistic survival only grew more desperate. When identity became the prize, the next composer's rivalry would push the struggle into even more dangerous territory. Rivalry forged legends, but the war never ends. Today, every viral feud and streaming chart is a new battlefield, ego versus ego, genius versus genius. Classical music drama isn't history, it's the blueprint for every creative clash that follows. In the world of art, peace is always temporary. What would you fight for?